Introduction to poetry, a small dedication to those that might know of me, they might know of you, and maybe your gang, but one thing's for sure, neither one of y'all can hang, cause yo, I'm like an arrow, and Scott is the crossbow, say something now. Thought so. You seem to be the type that only understand the annihilation and destruction of the next man. That's not poetry, that is insanity. It's simply fantasy, far from reality. Poetry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to AC23, the radio show / podcast of the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. My name is Chancellor Zero Skidmore, and my producer is Jeremy Corsine. Thank you for tuning in on the radio for the 23-minute version, and feel free to stream the full version on Apple Podcasts. While you're there, you can subscribe to it and also give us feedback via the 5-star ranking system, and give us as many stars as you want to give us. I have some good news. The Ebb and Flow Festival is still going to happen. It's going to be phenomenal. Some of it will be virtual, and a lot of it will be live. It's going to run from June 27th to July 4th. You can get the schedule of Ebb and Flow events at artsbr.org. That's artsbr.org. So, last year, the office of Mayor Sharon Weston Broome directed the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge to create a Poet Laureate post for the city of Baton Rouge. Our mission was to find a poet who could celebrate Baton Rouge's rich culture and diversity through their work, while also creating excitement around poetry through outreach programs, teaching, and written work, et cetera, et cetera. So our first Baton Rouge Poet Laureate was Kristen Cubs, the Poet Davenport. Shout out to Cubs, cool people. And today I get to chat with the newly appointed Baton Rouge Poet Laureate. Her work is creative, provocative, clever, and remarkably relatable. Her name is Brittany Marshall. Hey, Brittany, welcome to AC23.
Thank you for having me.
I realize there's probably about a 1-second lag after I say something and you get to respond. So just let it be weird.
I'm down.
Cool. So I want to thank you for being on the show. And I'm really excited to talk to you about what's going on with you in your life, in your world, and also what are your plans with this new appointment of Baton Rouge Poet Laureate. So I guess we'll start at the beginning, Brittany. We're gonna go all the way back, When did you start writing?
I think I started writing poetry in 7th grade. I had an English teacher who was like, we're gonna do a poetry unit. And that's when I really started getting into practice of writing. And it was just, like teen angst. A lot of it was about how my sister would take my clothes or like my perfume. I don't think it became what it is now until high school, in my creative writing classroom. And that's when I began to see that poetry, it wasn't just this thing where you just talk about what makes you mad and it rhymed, because that's what it was in 7th grade. And so it was in that class when I really started seeing poetry as this way to connect with other people, including myself, and a way to just kind of grow and heal and just speak about things that I didn't think or I didn't know I could speak about. So yeah, I think those are my 2 beginning points of poetry writing.
So the remark about poetry being loud and rhyming, I think I was doing that well into my 20s. So you were way ahead of the curve when you found out it wasn't just that, but it could totally be that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say there's that point where you kind of really got going. Did you at any point? I know for a lot of people, they're reticent to call themselves a poet. They kind of write poetry in secret for a while before they can come out of the poetry closet and say, you know what, hey, I'm a poet. Do you remember that being a big step?
No, I think I definitely wasn't calling myself a poet in like 7th grade when I was wriing. I don't think it was something that I thought I was like, I'm just like, it's an assignment right now. I do it sometimes, like how you say, like at home when the door is locked, you know, in my room when I'm mad. I don't think I realized like, oh, I'm kind of a poet now until high school. And not even when I was writing in creative writing class and sharing with my peers. I don't think I became a poet. At least I don't think I was aware of it till I started going to poetry slams and getting on stage and, you know, like being scored. I think for me, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm a poet now. Like that was what I thought it meant, as opposed to just being at home writing.
Yeah. And I was there for quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
I know you got some pretty amazing scores when you were up on stage. And I visited your classroom when you were at Baton Rouge High. Ricky Willis's class.
Yeah.
Great, amazing teacher. Amazing teacher, Ricky Willis.
Yes.
And a great poet herself. She doesn't want to call herself a poet. I know she's a dancer, and that's kind of her thing. But man, I've been in her classroom when she's written some stuff, and it has been killer.
Ms. Willis is great.
Yeah. Shout out to Ricky Willis. And now you were across the hall from her teaching.
Yes. We're colleagues. Yes, we're colleagues. It's really pretty full circle. I mean, that's kind of like my philosophy with things. Like I just love a full circle. And it's something I tell my students now. I was like, you know, like Ms. Willis was my teacher, you know, and they're like, what? No way. But you know, it's pretty surreal. It's pretty surreal. Because I'm such a different person than, you know, like Brittany, who was in Ms. Willis's creative writing class, you know? Like in more ways than one. Like, you know, I'm Brittany, like I'm a different version of myself, but also I'm Miss Marshall now too, which is wild. That's wild.
Well, yeah, I think like it's got to be weird, like being so close to your students' age, or at least closer than most of the teachers are, right? Mm-hmm. And also, like, you know, you might have went to school with some of their older brothers and sisters, right?
I have, yeah. Yeah.
So I remember a couple of my first visits to Miss Willis's classroom. I was blown away because all of the students, all of y'all were eager to write. You weren't afraid to share. Pretty much everybody got up and read. And also I remember everybody being really supportive of each other. Like, which is, you know, it typically takes a teaching artist a while to get a class there. Mm-hmm. But I saw all that stuff on day one. I was like, why am I here? Like, Miss Willis has been obviously doing writing workshops with y'all and giving y'all really, really concrete feedback. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was like a high level of craft going on in that classroom. And yeah, you were kind of the star. But I also remember your only year on the Brave New Voices team. That was the year I started picking up y'all's rough drafts and giving y'all written responses to your rough drafts for you know, for you to move forward with your other drafts. And that was the first year I started doing that. And we kept doing it. Desiree kept doing it once she took over as coach. And I think that was very helpful for all of the years that followed. We really saw that was, I don't know why we never did it before, but when we started doing it, we saw a lot of growth in the writing. Mm-hmm.
I think
where did we go, Brittany?
We went to
Where did we go for Brave New Voices?
We went to Philly.
It was Philly?
Yeah.
All right. What were you about to say?
I was gonna say it's really, I think that just speaks to like feedback, and you know, it's a form of like connecting too, you know. And I wonder like the reason why it wasn't a thing before was because I guess like sometimes people don't think of slam poetry as this thing that needs revision, you know, like as like this craft, this art that you have to work at. But I think that's great. You know, like feedback in all areas of life. That's my motto.
Yeah, I think we were hesitant. We didn't want to interject our voices into the kids' poems. And I think we just needed to give ourselves permission to get in there and say, hey, you can do better on this line, or hey, this is a mixed metaphor here, you need to fix this, you know. And not, you know, I think we were very, because I think we saw a lot of stuff at Brave New Voices that we weren't too cool with, as far as you know, the poets kind of mimicking their mentors in a way that almost seemed like it was all about the teacher and not about the student. And I think that's why we hesitated doing that. But yeah, we were really workshopping y'all.
Yeah.
And I don't think that most high school students, high school writers get that kind of workshopping. I think that's the kind of workshopping you get when you get to college, or maybe even when you become a struggling writer, going to paying for expensive retreats.
Yeah.
So Brittany, what does your process look like? And I also, like, I know you got your poems ready, right? Because I want to hear some poems.
I do have some poems
All
ready.
Right. All right. Well, before we get into your process, maybe we should hear a poem first, because we've gotten kind of deep into the show and I haven't heard any poetry.
Okay, we'll just go ahead to it. So yeah, let me pull them up on my phone here. Give me a moment. Okay, so this first poem is about my brother. And so my brother died really when I went to B&B. Like a few weeks before that, he had died.
I remember that.
Yes, and it really, it was a thing. But I wrote this poem, and it took me, I would say, like 2 years to actually write this poem and to have it exist the way I wanted it to exist. And even now, sometimes I look at it and I get to the end and I'm like, is that really, you know, it? But I'm just gonna read it, and then if you have questions, we can talk about it. But yeah, so it is titled When I Say Dead. When I say dead, I mean my brother, tall and dirt dark, shovel deep into the earth. I mean, I wore a white dress to his funeral and I have not looked at it since. When I say dead, I mean sometimes I dream about his body, dripping down to earth from the end of the sun to the beginning of dirt between then and now. I see him drip, drip, dripping, insignificant until he isn't. When I say dead, I mean hollow, absence of organs, more air than a body knows what to do with. I mean caskets and unflinching beauty. I mean my throat, clogged with the rust from my brother's gold teeth. When I say dead, I mean one time I asked him, why you only wear white shirts? To which he responded, because a nigga gotta stay casket sharp. You know how niggas like to dress fresh to death. So when I say dead, I mean fresh, or I mean dirt, or I mean my brother, or I mean my brother dressed up in dirt, or I mean dirt dressed with my brother's fresh body. When I say dead, I mean my brother ain't so fresh no more. I mean my brother's white shirt became a bloody mess. The dirt stole my brother's clothes and left me with the bones. When I say dead, I mean I still have his shoes in my closet. Even the pair with blood splattered on them. I still have his white shirts, but they don't smell like him anymore. When I say dead, I mean I've forgotten how my brother smells, or maybe I just don't remember. I only recognize the smell of dirt, and this dirt smells like nothing. When I say dead, I mean I don't know the significance of names anymore, because sometimes I go home and whisper my brother's name to the night, and the only thing I can hear is the sound of dirt crumbling out of my mouth. That's it.
So, wow. Thank you for that. So you say that that poem took you 2 years. What would you say, what was the longest section of that time? Was it the, maybe not the rough draft, but maybe like, were you in like maybe a 4th, 5th revision, or were you really adding new material to the poem over that time?
I think the first time I wrote it, it was just this big block, like this big chunk of things. And I think what took it so long was I had to actually like cut some things. I was like, well, it actually wasn't that, you know? And I think it's been a part of my grieving process, really, trying to figure out what it means for, you know, someone to have a loved one who is dead, but who is also still very, very much alive. And just how do I, you know, reckon with that, and his memory and the way it impacted me, and just, you know, live with it. And, you know, it's like it's this and this, you know, at the same time, these like competing images. And so I think it just took me a while to get to like, what are the images that are just kind of, you know, stuck with me.
Mm. Yeah, and you know, I can remember some students in our program back in the day who struggled with writing poems about siblings or relatives who passed away, and that grief is with you so long, and it's so powerful. But you're a poet that whole while, right?
Yeah.
You think you just had to do you think it was important to get past a certain level of grief before you really were able to kind of share it out loud?
Definitely. I think the first time I read it anywhere, it had been written for about a couple of months, and I had only just kind of read it to myself. And then one day I was just like, you know, I have this thing, I'm gonna try it out. Because I'm always willing to share that part of myself with people, the part of me that, you know, is a sister, and the grieving part of myself. I think, you know, we're all grieving in some way. And I think a lot of times it's this thing where we're just like, how do I get through this? You know, and it's like, well, you know, you go through it. And I think people need to see people go through things. You know, I think,
yeah. That you sound like my therapist. I'd gone through quite a bit of depression last year, and the year before that. And one of the things I felt bad about was like I would get depressed, and my 3-year-old son would notice. He'd be the first one to notice it. He's like, "Daddy, are you sad?" And you know, and then I feel like a horrible dad I'm ruining his childhood by, you know, moping around, you know. And my therapist was like, no, he needs to know that sometimes we all
kids be knowing, man. Kids know. I think kids, they really just have this spirit. And I know that because my niece is like that too. My youngest niece, she'll be like, Titi, are you sad? And she, you know, and you know, for them it's so simple, you know, or like, you know, the way they kind of see it, you know, she'll be like, are you sad? And I'm just like thinking to myself, like, I don't know what I am. But I think it's important that, you know, how you say, it's important that kids see that, you know, it's not like sadness isn't this anomaly, you know, and it's like, oh, well, what do I do? You know?
Yeah. And you know, we don't want to teach them to try to bury it and
right.
Yeah, and suffer in the ways that a lot of people suffer when they are not allowed to experience some of those vulnerable emotions.
Yeah.
So, what is your what do you want to do as Poet Laureate? What are some of the things that excite you about the position?
I think just having the title for one is something that's exciting, because one of my favorite poets, Tracy K. Smith, was U.S. Poet Laureate, and I got to see her in person a few times, and just that, like being able to connect with people, but for the sake of poetry and art. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to. Just like Tracy K. Smith was, just being in community with people and just sharing words. I'm not saying I'm a Tracy K. Smith, of course. She's phenomenal, but it allows, a poet to really just be in community with people. And it's something that poetry has always served, that purpose for me. Especially as somebody who's introverted, that's something that just means a lot to me, to just have like a safe and a healthy and educational way too, to just share space with people.
Well, that's very, very powerful. And I do want to say that the committee that selected you as Baton Rouge Poet Laureate, two of those people on the committee, one is the current state poet laureate, and one is a former state poet laureate. So you might be on your way to getting that post that Tracy K. Smith had. And I also want to shout out the rest of that committee. So that was John Warner Smith, the current poet laureate, Ava Heyman, the former poet laureate of Louisiana, Dr. Sue Weinstein, and there was Cubs, the poet, Christian Davenport, and there was also Brandy Worley, who's a published author here from Baton Rouge, very successful. And so, that is a strong committee, and they selected a powerhouse writer. So, yeah, I'm calling it. I'm calling that in your future.
We'll see. I mean, first. I'm at a point now.
And you gotta acknowledge me, Brittany, when you get it. When you get that U.S.
No, definitely. I'm like, Zero said it.
Zero said it.
Yeah.
So getting back to process, that the poem you shared, you said that one took 2 years. What is that average time for you? I'm sure it's not.
It's not. No. No, that's not average time. I write a lot. I do. And not just poems. Like I just write. I journal a lot. Just for mental health, and just I'm just have a lot going on in my head. But poetry wise, usually I'll just get inspired, by a line, or even just walking sometimes, or like a song, or I'll get an idea. And like I'll just write, what's in my head at the time. And usually I just let it be what it is. And it's only when I think about putting that poem somewhere or sharing it with someone that I go back and, kind of look at it. And so, yeah, it normally does not take me that long at all. No, it doesn't. Like I think I'm kind of quick in that way. Like when I get an idea, I just write it out, and then I go back and do what I want with it. I'll maybe get a good friend of mine to look at it and, do what I want with it. So yeah, usually no.
That's a big step. That's a big step, right? Getting somebody to look at it. I remember having at least two people that would give me some like hardcore critical feedback. And then I had that one friend who was just gonna make me feel good. Everything I wrote, she was just like, I was a genius. And for me, that was Mona Webb. Shout out to Mona Webb. But I needed her too. I needed somebody to kind of prop me up.
Yeah.
Before I called those other two people who were gonna pull out their rating pens. So cool. You got another poem queued up for us?
I do. So this poem is actually, it's kind of a mini series of poems. They're self-portraits. I wrote them when I was a part of this workshop series. And the workshop series was all about really femininity and how we express that, and the positive and negative implications of being a woman. And so it's a 3-part poem. I just read it all as one. So it's different self-portraits. The first one is self-portrait as eyeshadow. From dust you come, and to dust you'll go. So in the mornings, I paint my eyelids with a ghost palette. Being a woman is all about being a gorgeous haunting. Our bodies leave us so quick. We only receive life to give life, and what a condition. I spend my morning thinking about who will do my makeup at my funeral, how I'm scared no one will be able to do it the way I like, an all natural smoky eye, all gold and auburn and shimmering and blended into a smoky haze. So that was the first part. The second part is self-portrait as a hot iron. Don't miss the hot iron. I do not miss the hot iron. And so I had fun writing this one because I think that was a memory, a childhood thing I had kind of hidden. And so, it has such an impact on me and like just how I see beauty in myself. So self-portrait as a hot iron. Beauty is pain, and you want to be beautiful, don't you? At 6 years old, I learned what it means to be a girl. Willing to burn, willing to boil, willing to blacken, willing to singe, willing to ash yourself into the prettiest scar anybody has ever seen. So that's that one. And the last one is self-portrait as lotion. Lather me in your best. I want the fancy shit. Not the pear-scented vanilla cream, not the green apple moisturizer either. Give me the coconut, the rolled lavender oats, the burnt almond, the cocoa and vanilla body butter. I want the fruit to want me for once. I want the lotion to be softened by my skin for once. I want the lotion to come slithering behind my knees, slide between my toes, shimmy itself around my neck, press itself into my skin and say, oh, how I have been waiting for a body to release myself into, oh, how glorious to be lathered in a black girl's bark. Oh, how it feels to be dire. So that's the end of that little series.
That's awesome. I love those.
Thanks.
Very, very creative. So, what was the prompt in that? Was there a prompt in that workshop, or you just kind of?
It was really just think of 3 aspects that you associate, like 3 aspects of your femininity. Like, how do you express your femininity? Mm-hmm. And it could be positive or negative, like what's the memory? Like, how did you learn that like this was a gendered thing, And
you selected 3 concrete objects.
Yes. And so I selected the objects, and the self-portrait, it's something I had been wanting to do for a while, like a kind of prompt I've been wanting to experiment, like this self-portrait as a thing, Mm-hmm. And I was intrigued by it, especially in that workshop, because for me, and I think a lot of women can relate to this, but, so like we become these things, like our bodies become these things, our hair is a thing, that means something else. And so, we're taught like these are the things you need to present yourself as a woman, but what does this thing really mean? What is it really teaching me about, how I identify as a woman? And, when I was as a little girl, not even having much awareness about, what was going on around me.
So a means of processing that objectification that I think that, that men have a tendency to do, but also we condition young girls to do it as well, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I remember one time someone asked me like, oh, when do you remember getting your first perm? Like when did you make the switch from natural to straight hair? And I was like, I don't ever remember not having straight hair, so I was probably really young when I got my first perm. Like I have no pictures of me with natural hair, and
yeah,
it's like when I said it out loud, and I was like, wait, I was like, like it didn't just come out this way,
yeah.
And like as an adult, just thinking about, like what was being done to my hair as a kid.
Yeah, just wow, that's mind blowing to not even remember your own natural state of being.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So this is a deep question right here. This is my deep question.
Oh,
So
no.
like, as writers, we participate in a much bigger dialogue, right? That's happening in society. We find ways as artists to kind of interject our voices into that dialogue. What are some of the things you're hearing in the collective dialogue of America right now, and what response does that initiate in you?
Wow, that is a deep question. There's honestly there's so much going on in the world right now, and as somebody who just thinks a lot, just even outside of the ways of the world, it's a lot. It's very overwhelming, and I think right now, just in the world, especially with like COVID, and everything going on right now, in terms of race and gender, I think there is a lot of just confusion and hatred in the air, and so it's hard to not be suffocated by it, especially somebody who spends a good bit of time on like social media and things. And so like to take care of myself, a lot of times I just have to, just remove myself from it. But also it's important for me to really like speak out in the ways that, I'm mentally able to, because, the things going on there, it's not isolated. It's not just like, oh, well, there's this thing going on. And like, it's like these are people involved, and I'm one of the people who is impacted by it. And so really just, advocating and working the way I do, like with students, with kids, with poetry, on social media, sharing art, watching the webinars, reading. That's always my form of activism, and letting other people know what to read. And so, I mean, it's not something we can run away from. And I think a lot of people just want to kind of, put it in a box, or like, oh, that we're done with that, like, let's move on. And you can't do that, and so I think just always, just sliding it in the ways I can, rather it be a poem or, a song, and just using art to show, that this has always been a thing that has existed. This has always been a system that's existed. And now, it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? What are we all gonna do?
Yeah, I think that, quite often us poets, we get a bad rap. A lot of people like to separate talking and doing.
Yeah.
Right. And like for a writer, talking is doing. Like that is our action is language, right?
Yeah.
And I used to tell my students that there's no great movement that has ever existed that didn't have speeches that initiated it, that didn't have strategies that were articulated to go along with it. The planning that one does in any type of movement or any type of large scale social experiment or whatever, there has to be language first. Nobody just like comes together one day and does something without the language there.
And I think people underestimate the power that language has had in, building systems, but also, reforming them and tearing them down.
Yeah. Well, we're poets are revisionists, right? Writers revise. And so I think that it's very prideful of us to say, oh, we have a perfect system, there's no need to ever amend it. Like, what do you think an amendment is?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, part of the, I think the framers of this country, they by no means were, they weren't deities, they were flawed humans just like the rest of us. But I think that, we all should be humble enough to say, okay, I helped create this thing. but future generations are going to want to update it and
Yeah.
change it, and maybe dismantle some parts of it, and rebuild some parts of it, and that's cool. I've given them a foundation to build upon. And so I think a lot of people are intimidated when you say, oh, we want to change something. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
wait a minute. You know, it's
Yeah.
like change is scary to a lot of people, but I mean, you know, how can, you know, aren't we supposed to be, as a human race, aren't we supposed to be evolving, you know? And if so, yeah, we gotta change stuff, you know, all the time. So I'm gonna ask you this question as you queue up another poem. And maybe you already got it queued up. Who are some of your influences as a writer, or even as a performer? I know you say you did slam. I know you did slam.
Yeah.
And so, like, who are some of your influences that you think have made an impact in who you are as a writer today?
Wow. Firstly, definitely Maya Angelou. She's really one of those writers, you know, she's in the canon, and everybody knows her, you know, and so it was one of my first portrayals of poetry, but also as like, oh, okay, this is a writer. Like, you know, this is this Black woman who is writing things. And it wasn't just like, it wasn't only that she was a Black woman and she was writing, but it was what she was writing about, you know, and she was writing about herself. And her story, you know, the good, the bad, the confusing, you know, the simple. And that has always just been something that just stuck with me, the idea that I can tell my own stories, you know, I can write about myself and my life. And so that's that, and people want to read it, you know, that's the thing. And it can be a beautiful thing. And so definitely Maya Angelou, Lucille Clifton, Nikki Giovanni, Enzo Shange, those are just in a nutshell, you know, because the way they use language also, you know, I am a strong advocate for accessibility. And so like their writing is accessible to me. And so I didn't need to have a fancy vocabulary, or, you know, I think there's this idea that poetry has to be this thing you really work hard to understand, like, what is this writer saying? And, you know, of course, like sometimes that's necessary, and, you know, that too is a skill and an art, but sometimes, you know, it's not about the work you have to do to understand, but what you do with the information presented to you. And I think the way they just use, you know, like, it's very simple and accessible to just say these really deep and profound things. You know, it can be just as moving. And someone who's not a poet but has had an impact on my writing, Toni Morrison. You know, because I wish, it's really quite a shame that she wasn't a poet, because she does so much in like so little space. Like, I think about her novels, how, you know, like, they're not 700-page novels, you know. They're, you know, they're small, but she does so much in them. And I think about, you know, how she thinks about and writes about race, which is something that means a lot to me, you know, to really just unpack, you know, race and how it just saturates everything, you know. And, you know, like, what do we do with this thing that is everywhere, like, all at once, all the time?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my people.
Yeah, you said Toni Morrison, and I, you know, I immediately thought about the Song of Solomon. Like, there are bits of poetry in her prose when people are talking, and I'm like, who, if people just talk like this, the world would be perfect. Like,
no, really. Yeah.
Yeah, she definitely has some beautiful language in her writing. And so yeah, do you have another poem for us now?
I do. Let me just go ahead.
Language.
So this one is about, I think the kind of theme of it is mental health. That's also something that means a lot to me, as someone who has to live with depression and anxiety. And so this poem is about depression in its various forms. Like one day overcoming depression, the days when I don't, and just my hope for myself. So it's called Depression in 3 parts. 1, half a life away, I am fluttering through another dimension. The wind carves all the wounds from my skin. One by one, I watch my pain dematerialize into a weightless mist. I have been unheavied, the great weight of me has been lifted, and now I want to inherit the anticipation of tomorrow. 2, one day I'll be boisterous, my face will splash into laughter, I'll stretch into a tower of more. I'll scatter into light, I'll witness the sun rise again, I'll spin myself dizzy, head gone in a river of longevity. One day I'll be here to witness my own livelihood. 3, I remain here as the discomfort in the guts, the tossing and turning of the sheets. I have made a home of dejection. I have grown too comfortable in the decline of my own self, and I am scared of how far I can run myself into the ground. That's it.
I like you got that. That's it after every poem. That's it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So Brittany, you're from North Baton Rouge, correct?
Yes.
So, did you ever, growing up, know a writer who was from where you're from?
I did not. I didn't see a lot of people around me writing. Like I was raised with my grandparents, like they didn't write. So no, the only time I saw any writing was, like at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your family, how do they respond to this thing you do? I know they probably just see you as a teacher, as a full-time teacher, but is there an acknowledgement, or like do they make space for that in their lives for you as a writer?
Not really. I mean, no. I can't say that they do. I think my granny, I think she doesn't quite know what I do in terms of poetry. I think she's just like, yeah, she be writing poems and like people like to hear her, and sometimes she gets
people like it.
So yeah, for her it's kind of like that's the way it is for her. And a lot of and it's funny because I told them, I was talking to my grand, I said, Mom, Poet Laureate. She was like, what that mean? And I tried to, it was one of those times where like, it's not just like an age difference, but also just like a literacy and education, difference. And I was like, wow, how do I explain this to somebody who doesn't really have an understanding of, Poet Laureate? And
yeah.
I said it's kind of, and I was like, well, I'm kind of like an ambassador, and that's not really something. She was like, okay, like, and so I was like, I'm kind of like a deacon or an usher of like poetry. And so she was like, oh, she goes to church. And so she's like, oh, okay. I was like, so yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna go around and, like make sure everybody's good, have some poems with me. And she's like, oh, that's so nice.
Spread the good word of poetry.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm spreading the word of poetry, and she was like, oh, well, that sounds nice. And that was kind of it. But even like my family, they're my sisters, my siblings, they're people who don't enjoy school and don't enjoy writing. It's like essays and things. Poetry is stupid. I can't understand it. And so it's not really something we talk about. Really, they know I do it in this kind of abstract way. But concretely, I don't think they really know, like what I do with poetry. Yeah. I teach it sometimes.
Yeah, I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
I was the family nerd. and yeah, it was, you know, even in my teen years, I can remember like, he always reading. What you reading now? Like, I like to read. Why?
Yeah.
You know, it's and even when it was like comic books, it was weird. And you know, it's sad because I had family members like uncles who I could see so much talent in them, but art was not realistic for people who lived where we lived. You needed to go out and get a real job, and you know, and bring some money home, and you would work until your back was sore, and then you would, you know, doze off and get up and go do it all again. And so there just wasn't not a lot of space for art, period. Well, you know, I'm excited that so many young people who look like you are going to see you do what you do, because just like, you know, you're going to be somebody's Tracy K. Smith. You know, I mean, you are now. You know, you're teaching. So and you know, like how many students, you know, have not ever seen a teacher who looked like them. So I think that's very powerful, and I think it's also powerful that a lot of kids get to see someone who doesn't look like them and all of their, and 90% of the teachers they've had. And so, you know, we all benefit from seeing someone like you in this position, hold this space and represent. And I can't even put into words, Brittany, how proud I am of your success, how proud I've always been of your work, and to see this come to fruition, and to be sitting here talking to you now. It's just like, you know, it's my dad is coming out, you know. All the dad in me is on full display.
I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, so you've set up, and I would say too, like, shout out to Anna West, who really gave me the opportunity to be in your classroom, and you know, all the things that she did, the ways that she mentored me and allowed me to kind of pass the torch as a teacher. And to see you teaching, that's a lineage of teachers that exists now in Baton Rouge, even going back to her mother, Miss Mary West, who's a legendary teacher here in the city. So you've set up some Twitter. You set up a Twitter account as Baton Rouge Poet Laureate to kind of stay in touch with people who are interested in what's going on with you as Poet Laureate. And what's that Twitter info?
So people can follow me on Twitter at Baton Rouge, capital P, capital L. So that's my Twitter handle, and that's where I am.
So I'm going to be following you soon as I log off.
Yes,
and
please do.
Repeat it one more time for everybody.
At Baton Rouge, capital P, capital L. Baton Rouge, PL.
I had to write it. I didn't have it written down. I got it written down now. Cool. So, yeah, man. I'm gonna be looking forward to. I know you got something coming out for Juneteenth. And I don't know if, I guess, yeah, we'll air the radio version of this show on this coming Friday. So, yeah, Saturday. What's the date Saturday? What is the date?
Good question. The 20th. The 20th, yeah.
The
20th.
Saturday the 20th, and that's going to be here at the Arts Council building, correct?
I don't know.
Juneteenth poetry reading. I think it will.
Will it? Okay.
I think it will. Y'all, everybody's going to have to go to at Baton Rouge PL to stay tuned to get this information about the Juneteenth poetry reading with Brittany Marshall, the Baton Rouge Poet Laureate.
Yeah, I'll be doing a workshop. There's going to be an open mic. So please follow the Twitter account. Not a lot of followers right now. So yeah.
We're going to get it up. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on the show today. Thank you for the amazing poetry that you shared. You also, and I should have mentioned this earlier, you've published a book. And where can people get that book today?
So I published a book as Youth Poet Laureate. My only understanding of where it is on the Forward Arts website. But I got published in the Garden of Black Joy anthology. And so you could find that on the Google, or hit me up on my Twitter page and I could send you a direct link. So that's, awesome. Yeah, that's where I am.
So so I'm gonna say this too. It's time for another Brittany Marshall book. I'd like to have one. I got your first one. I guess that's like a collector's item now.
Probably.
But it was on Penmanship Press, correct?
Yes.
Penmanship, they're still around. They should be able to.
Maybe. I don't know if they're still around.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I have to look into it. I'm gonna get on the Arts Council website and put up a post if they are. I'm gonna put a link up for people to get that because that was an amazing book. And yeah, you gotta do us another one when you get the time.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, all right, Brittany. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you and the Arts Council and the mayor and the mayor's office, just for the opportunity. You know, we're here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.